So for your audience, if they do want to invest passively, that to me is the best way again to medical office, because there are nuances. It does take years to get up the learning curve of all the different classes. It's a little bit different with multifamily. Multifamily, you're renting apartments. There's not much of a learning curve. It's more about what kind of compensation packages or TI packages you might offer your tenants and what's your vacancy rates, absorption rates for multifamily. But medical office is a completely different animal, and you really need experts. And because I would hate to see people lose money if they invest in medical office and haven't done enough homework or due diligence to create success.
Welcome to the Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. Each week we investigate themes of leadership, entrepreneurship, and mindset with some of the greatest minds in real estate. And now, the data scientist of real estate, George Roberts.
Welcome back, investors. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Ben Reinberg, the CEO and founder of Alliance Consolidated Group of Companies. Welcome to the show, Ben.
Thank you, George. I appreciate it. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you for having me.
All right, awesome. Great to have you on the show. Well, I'm really excited because I've been reading up a lot on you, and I see you've got a really interesting career. You've been in multiple facets of commercial real estate. Looks like you started out in office and industrial. You went to retail, medical properties. I've got so many questions I'm looking forward to asking you. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Great to be here.
All right, great. Well, you know, I've always been very interested in medical office space, medical buildings, surgery centers. Why don't you tell us what brought you into that space after going into industrial and retail?
Well, we saw the internet was becoming more prevalent. We saw that we've been through different cycles. I'm 53 years old. I've been doing this for coming up on 3 decades of investing in commercial real estate. And George, what we determined as a company, we said, what can produce stable cash flow, safe, secure, and profitable investing? And it was about 18 years ago, out of my 29 plus year career, we decided to put some attention towards medical office. And that was a product type for us and our investors to really expand and look at what can create that cash flow, what can create upside. And the human body is never going out of style. And so 5 years ago, we got into veterinary office, which kind of mirrors how medical office works as well. So the decision was we were looking and saying, well, we should really start focusing away from retail. General office is in the suburbs is struggling at the time. And we said, what are some other asset classes we can get our arms around? And medical office was a great decision. And we've been flourishing ever since.
Yeah, exciting stuff. And one of the things I like the best about your career is that you really follow the trends. You're looking at health and you're trying to figure out what makes the most sense. I know that you've been through, we're going to read you a quick list here. So you've gone through like plasma, dialysis, orthopedic, gastro, and what I'd like to do is just ask you, what is your rationale behind all those different types of medical space? What drove you from one to the other? And what do you think is the hottest trend now?
Well, there's not one particular trend. I mean, we look at where areas in the country we want to invest our capital. We look at what different niches, we look for niches where the tenants invest significant capital in their spaces. And so there's a myriad, a large amount of tenants out there in the United States that invest in their spaces. It could be into physicians, into surgery centers. It could be dialysis. It could be orthopedic, dermatology, neurology. We touch all the different classes because we become experts. There's a high barriers to entry to get into medical office investing. And so that being said, obviously with skin cancer going on, dermatologists and Mohs surgery has been very prevalent. Plastic surgery has been big the last 10 years. So there's a lot of different niches that do very well in the medical office space.
Right. Exciting. Well, one of the things that I mentioned I was most interested in is those surgery centers. I mean, I've noticed, you know, there's just such a differential between what it costs to have minor surgery done at a center versus at a hospital, because they put all the overhead, right? That's why a Band-Aid costs like $50, aspirin's $100. I'm making it up, but you know what I'm talking about. I mean, those bills, you know, you get a hospital bill and it's nuts. It just goes on and on with all the overhead for all these various things. That's one of the things that really makes a whole lot of sense to me. I noticed the same thing with MRIs too. You can get an MRI by my house, like $300 at a center. But if you were going to go and have it done at a hospital, it's like $3,000. So I wonder if you could give us additional insight into that, and what are the ways that maybe if you're interested in stepping into this space, becoming the landlord, that you can benefit from that.
Well, it's an interesting point. What we saw with imaging centers, what you talked about, is usually about a third of the cost of being on hospital campus. And so there's a tremendous savings. That's what the demand generators to create great investments and tenants. And if you're looking to get into the medical office investing, it really takes a long time to get your arms around the different niches, what makes sense. That's why we launched the Alliance Medical Property Fund. The Alliance Medical Property Fund offers investors to passively invest in experts like us, where they can invest in medical office, but they don't have to worry about all the learning curve and nuances that you have to go through for medical office, different niches, the licensing, the investments into the spaces. How do you analyze whether a tenant has a high default risk if they're going to adhere to their lease? Leases are different too. So there's so many nuances that go on in medical office. It's why we launched a brand new fund, the Alliance Medical Property Fund, because it allows people that are interested and want to get in the space that don't have to do the heavy lifting. So we've had such this overwhelming demand, George. We just can't feed all the demand we're getting. And so we're probably increasing the amount of fund or additional funds to feed it. So for your audience, if they do want to invest passively, that to me is the best way to get into medical office, because there are nuances. It does take years to get up the learning curve of all the different classes. It's a little bit different with multifamily. Multifamily, you're renting apartments. There's not much of a learning curve. It's more about what kind of compensation packages or TI packages you might offer your tenants and what's your vacancy rates, absorption rates for multifamily. But medical office is a completely different animal, and you really need experts. And because I would hate to see people lose money if they invest in medical office and haven't done enough homework or due diligence to create success.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those pitfalls, because it is very important to understand the barriers to entry. Of course, always good to be someplace where there are barriers to entry, because you're not going to see the competition just rise up over a month, 6 months, a year. It takes a long time. So one of those pitfalls, as I understand, is suppose you want to start, say a surgery center, et cetera. You really need to have some very experienced doctors that are interested in moving in there. Isn't that usually your first step? And then maybe you can tell us what are some of the other maybe less obvious pitfalls if you want to go and build some of this medical office space out.
Well, I mean, one, you got to look at the dynamic of the group. You have to look at ages of the doctors. You have to look at services they provide. If you're going to do a surgery center, you got to look at financial statements of the surgery center. If you're going to go build a surgery center, obviously you're going to have the physician group or the hospital system in your pocket ready to go instead of building spec. So there's certain licensing laws, certain requirements by the group, and it's complicated. It's quite a process and an ordeal to go through. And so a lot of the pitfalls is going up on the learning curve is, how long you've been doing it, how to deal with it, how to deal with your lender. Do you have investors involved? What kind of environmental reports do you need? What do you need about the land to know the elevations? There's so many nuances in development. It adds another layer of complication when you go in and you develop a medical office. And that's why people invest in Alliance and what I do in my company, because we have 200 plus years of leadership team experience in commercial real estate, which is tremendous, that work in my company. And because of that foundation, that allows us to mitigate a tremendous amount of risk. And see, George, one thing I want to explain to you about this business, commercial real estate investing, is it's a marathon business. It's not, you get rich quick. You have to be in it for a while and go up the learning curve and to experience how to become successful, because you're going to have failures. But what's exciting about it is once you hit a certain point. So I'll give you an example. Someone told me a long time ago when I was a young man, spend the first third of your career on your back, second third on your feet, last third on your stomach. I'm currently on my stomach, but you have to go through those pains and learning curve to get to this point. And medical office is no different. Medical office is complicated. And so that's why I always encourage people, If you're looking to invest and it's not your core business, or it's something that you're not 110% focused on, invest passively in a company like ours and like, say, our new fund or whatever you want to do, because there's so many nuances. If you're not committed and focused 110, 120% on what you're doing, you can really put yourself in a situation where you lose money. And I hate to see people out there do that.
Yeah, outstanding. And another angle on that is you'd think that doctors themselves would be the ideal people to own their own real estate, but that's not always the case. Some of your sellers in many cases are doctors who maybe they got in over their head, or maybe they just decide to do everything themselves, and it just becomes a millstone around their neck. So what can you tell us about doctors that may be looking to get out of the business and want to be run by professional management? What are some of the advantages there?
Well, I mean, one of the advantages, we do a lot of sale leasebacks or by existing lease. We have a lot of physicians that approach us and say, sold my building to a hospital system. Can you help me? There seems to be a conflict of interest, so I want to sell the building. We have others that are looking for capital to deploy into their business or other investments. And so we do sale leasebacks with them. So if you're a doctor out there and you're looking to be able to solve a challenge, we're a solution-oriented firm and alliance. And what that does is that allows us to solve your problems, whether you have an issue going on personally or professionally, or there's a conflict of interest. People come to us all the time to sell their real estate, whether it's a sale leaseback, existing lease, and it really becomes advantageous. We bring the doctors on the same side of the table as us. And if you go to my website, alliancecgc.com, you could see testimonials of why doctors sell properties and why they sell them to us, and some of the challenges that we've been able to solve for them. So if you're out there in the ether and you're struggling with your property and you're a doctor in a medical office building that you own, feel free to reach out to us because we could solve any challenge that you have. We're very solution oriented, as I just mentioned. So it's to me, it's some of the portion of the business that we do is solving a lot of these physicians' issues.
Yeah, and it's a pretty beautiful situation. On the one hand, you've got a motivated seller because they're sick and tired of running it, and because they appreciate that they're getting that millstone off from around their neck, right? They potentially become your ideal tenant. You mentioned about the ages of the doctors. I think this is one of the places where it becomes important when you start to sign the leases. Why don't you explain why the age structure of the doctors is important?
It's a great question, George. And I'll tell you why, because you want to know the dynamic of the ages. So for example, you have a bunch of doctors in their 70s and they're looking to retire. What's their succession plan? What is the niche that those physicians fulfill? Because some niches, doctors can work longer than others. The surgeons, they're only going to do surgery for a certain amount of shelf life, and so you have to have a succession plan. You want to see a dynamic. We like to see older and younger doctors in a group because that solidifies where the business is going and where it's heading in the future.
Right. And then also, I understand some of the older doctors, maybe they don't want to sign a personal guarantee. I mean, what are the differences between this and, say, like a dance studio? If you get a personal guarantee from somebody who's running a bakery, a dance studio, or something like that, that doesn't really mean as much as when you get a personal guarantee from a high net worth individual.
Well, personal guarantees are only as good as the quality of the person signing it. It just keeps you vested if you have a problem. So we also look at security deposits because that can help mitigate, or we might do a hybrid of both depending on the situation in a lease. The difference in a medical office compared to a dance studio, and by the way, we have a retail property with one of the most famous dance studios in. It's interesting you brought that up, in Windermere, Florida. And what's interesting, the difference is investment. Medical office has a tremendous amount of investment that goes in the property by the tenants, whether it's equipment, electrical, generators, you name it. And so what happens, George, is you become in a situation where you look at it and you look at the investment, it makes it harder to leave. The retention rate of tenants in the medical office space is tremendous. It's usually in the mid to high 80s around the country on average. And so at the end of the day, what ends up happening is you have a higher renewal probability with a medical tenant compared to a dance studio.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. And maybe we should move on a little bit I do want to ask you also about, I did ask you briefly about the trends you're following. Is there any trends you're willing to let out? Like, I know you also mentioned recently physical therapy, baby boomers and the aging population. This is one of the things that's coming on really strong. Any other trends you're after?
Just basically, we look at medical and veterinary right now. We're looking to get back into industrial as well. And we have a long history in industrial and built a lot of industrial in our career. And so we're looking at that. And we're also exploring other asset classes to start exploring new funds into.
Okay, that's good. I love it because I feel like you got to be agile and things do get crowded. And like you said earlier, this is a harder field to get crowded, but really awesome that you're looking out for some other things like industrial. What's got you headed back towards industrial?
We like industrial. We've always liked industrial. We're just looking in different areas around the country. It's just, it's diversification for us is why we're interested in getting back into industrial.
Okay, awesome. Well, let's move on to some philosophy. I've seen many of your interviews. You've got a lot of great philosophies that I think people can take advantage of. And from the very get-go as a broker, you described your philosophy as being that you're just going to just cut to the chase. I'll tell you what's wrong with the property. You're going to figure it out anyway. I don't want you to retrade it. I love that. And can you tell me how you settled on that as a philosophy and what that's done for you?
Well, basically, we do enough due diligence up front, and we have an understanding. We ask enough questions. The only time you would have a retrade situation if the seller's not being upfront and honest with you. So if you can't determine the age of the HVAC, the roof, the parking lot, the structure, and you can't get enough information, you're not in a retrade situation. You're more in an exploration situation of you weren't told upfront. So it becomes a discussion. But generally speaking, we have that information up front and we know what's coming and we know what we have to account for. And we will value the property up front when we make an offer with all those contingencies that we see might be coming.
Love it. And then I love the contrast between people who are great employees versus people who are great entrepreneurs. Did you have an aha moment when you realized that you were destined to be an entrepreneur, not an employee?
Well, I've always been an entrepreneur. And I've always wanted my own business. And it was something ingrained in me when I was younger. And it just carries through to me today. So for me, it was just more about when I was younger, growing up, saying to myself, who do I want to be and want to become? And I look at my father taking the train to downtown Chicago in a blue suit and a red tie and seeing the risk and the aggravation of potentially getting fired or mergers and acquisitions. And I said, well, how do I insulate myself? And that is, I want to control my own destiny. And so that's what kind of showed me the way to become who I am today.
All right, awesome. And I wanted to ask you about one of your earlier deals. I think that people who overcome hurdles, I think that's really where the lessons are. They say success is a poor teacher. But as I understand, your first deal was sort of a hard deal, but you really turned it around and turned it into a great success after all. Tell us what you learned through that.
I learned that hard work and persistence and great resources and having a great team around you can produce great results. And so I learned at a young age that there's no such thing as can't. And so you have to show up every day and work hard. And if you do that, I learned, George, that you can accomplish anything in life. So it was my mindset that had to change. And once I was able to do that, the sky's the limit.
All right, great. Now I want to read you one of my favorite quotes from you. So when I'm happy, my environment changes. Tell us about that.
Well, what I meant by that is, for a while, I was always seeking to be happy. And I realized that if happiness is created from my own internal self, if I'm happy, so a lot of people will tell you that if you're looking for happiness, it's because you got to change your environment. Once I change my internal self, I realize my environment will change. So if you want to create happiness, you got to change it within yourself. And if you change yourself internally, you'll find happiness because your external environment will feed off of that and that will change as well. And so I was always looking for that and saying, why am I not happy? Why am I not fulfilled? It's because I wasn't able to change my environment because I couldn't change myself. I was depending on other people, external force to provide it for me. Instead, once I realized it was me that had to change, then all of a sudden my environment changed shortly thereafter.
Yeah, love it. And then I think another one of your current commitments is that when you're criticized or facing disagreement, take a step back, open the mind and say, hey, what's the lesson here? So tell us what that's done for you.
Well, I mean, you're always seeking the truth in what people say. And when people criticize you, it gives you a moment to take a step back and say, yeah, that person's probably right. Let me learn from what I just did. Let me explore it. Let me think about it. Let me be aware of what I just did. And when that happens, you realize, how do I improve? How do I grow? So criticism to me is synonymous with growth. When people criticize you, take it for what it's worth, listen to it, hear what they're saying, seek the truth behind what they're saying. And it's a great opportunity to grow.
Well, I love it. One of my favorite quotes is, a bad day for the ego is a good day for the soul. So there's always an opportunity. Difficulties, we shouldn't shrink from them. And then what about mentoring? I know that's something that you have focused a lot on recently. I know you're building your YouTube channel. You're going out on the podcast circuit. Tell us what it is about mentoring. Obviously, you're making bank doing what you're doing. You could just go out there and run your fund and you'd be fine. What is it about mentoring that draws you?
I want to give back. I want to give back and serve and help people. And as I get later in my career, in the last third of my career, which I mentioned earlier, it's something that's gratifying me to help people and serve people. So we're going to start teaching commercial real estate throughout the United States. And my podcast, my personal brand has taken off in order to promote that serving. And I come from Chicago, Illinois. It's one of the most violent cities in America. And I realized that if I could help a young man or woman change their life by teaching them commercial real estate to get out of their environment, how could they build wealth for their family and change the legacy for their entire family? And how many people could I do that for? And so that was a motivating driver for me to launch the personal brand, which is taking off. And then my podcast, Ben Reinberg, I Own It, has been wildly successful, which has allowed me to really market the platform to be able to start teaching commercial real estate.
Great. I'm glad you mentioned that because that was actually next on my list. I've seen your episodes and great work. Really appreciate it. So the theme of your podcast is essentially to be responsible for every aspect of your life.
Yeah, that's correct. And so the Ben Reinberg I Own It show, we bring on guests from all over the world that own it. They own all aspects of their life, which is their behavior, their relationships, their mindset, their business, how they treat people. The list goes on, and they own it. So we have celebrities and ultra high net worth individuals that come on that have created success to significance and create significance in their world. And so at the end of the day, that's who we bring on. And obviously you've seen different episodes and it keeps escalating, and the guests keep escalating. The stakes get higher and higher. And so we're excited about it. I'm having a lot of fun shooting it. We have a great studio in Laguna Beach that we do it out of, which is a lot of fun, and I'm enjoying it. And it's an incredible networking hour that I get with these incredible guests. I get them one-on-one, and we get to build relationships with these talented people. And so at the end of the day, George, I'm having a lot of fun, and we look forward to seeing it expand and grow. And you can listen to it on all different platforms. If you go to benreinberg.com, you can follow me on all different social media platforms. You could see us we go live on LinkedIn and Facebook every week. And sometimes we shoot 3 or 4 or 5. And then also you can go on to YouTube and see, different clips. And then you can listen to us on all the different platforms as well.
Yeah, outstanding. I think that's the only way to go. Doing, your life, your business, your mindset, it's all tied together. Well, I think it's time to probably bring it in. I'd like to ask you our rapid fire round here. We call it the 7. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's bring it on.
All right, let's do it. Okay. If you could be known for only one thing, what would it be?
My generosity.
What's the greatest lesson in leadership you've learned as an entrepreneur?
Be a great listener.
What personal characteristic has been most pivotal to your success?
Persistence.
All right. And then this is where we like to get a little wild, take a nod to the randomness of the universe. Got my random question card. Just tell me when to stop cutting the deck.
Stop.
All right. Top card. Have you ever had an experience that led you to believe in angels or ghosts?
No.
Name a book that has helped to forge you as a leader or as an entrepreneur, and why?
Oh boy, so many books I read. I'm trying to think of one. I think Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus is a great book that's helped me learn how to deal with people.
Great. My wife loves it. Yeah, I've listened to those books with my wife, John Gray.
He's coming on the show soon.
Oh, wow. That'll be a great guest. I'm sure he'll have a lot to say. Yeah, I love it. You have guests from all over, all kinds of people. Love it. Can you describe a failure misstep and what it taught you?
Just to be able to manage my emotions, with employees and challenges that go on in our complicated business of commercial real estate.
All right. Can you give us a quote to help forge our listeners as leaders and entrepreneurs?
Yeah, I have a couple of good ones. Let me think of the best one I want to share. A good one is, don't be the best, do whatever it takes.
All right, outstanding. Now I have to make sure that everybody's able to reach out to you. So if you want to talk to Ben Reinberg, maybe you want to be one of his mentees, maybe you want to invest in his Alliance fund, how do we do that?
Well, there's a couple of things. Go to benreinberg.com to follow me on all social media platforms. We talked about the podcast, Ben Reinberg - I own it. Feel free to go on all the podcast platforms. And to follow my company, it's AllianceCGC.com. That's AllianceCGC.com. And you can go on, log in, look at how you can invest in the new Alliance Medical Property Fund. We have limited spots and a lot of demand. So if you're interested out there, I encourage you to reach out to us. We're happy to help you generate wealth through passive investing in medical properties.
Outstanding. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your knowledge and experience with our audience, Ben.
You're welcome. Thanks, George, for having me. I appreciate it.
All right, awesome.